Hello, everyone. I am Michael Steelman, Director of Alumni Career Management and Professional Networks for William & Mary, and it is my pleasure to welcome you all to today's event, Diverse Voices in Hollywood, a discussion focused on diversity in the arts and entertainment industry and the importance of amplifying voices of diverse and underrepresented artists and creators. This event is a partnership between William & Mary's Global Film Festival, Office of Diversity and Inclusion, the University Advancement, and the William & Mary Alumni Association. It takes a team of colleagues to pull together events like this, and I want to acknowledge and say thank you to Craig Anzalone, William & Mary's Senior Director for the West Coast, for his leadership in bringing together today's event with his fellow Los Angeles-based alumni, Phil Sun and Cord Jefferson. Phil and Cord are terrific examples of the vibrant professionals that make up the William & Mary Arts and Entertainment Network. This event is the first of a series of events to support and engage William & Mary professionals in the arts and entertainment community. So we hope you will be back and join us again soon. Now, just a few quick technology reminders before I turn things over to our guest speakers. Today's session is being recorded, and I will notify all registrants once the recording is posted to wmalumni.com. Questions are welcome, and our moderator will address as many questions as time will allow. If you just roll over the bottom portion of the Zoom window, you should see a Q&A icon appear. Please use that feature to submit your questions. Obviously, if you prefer the chat, we'll check those as well. Now, without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce William & Mary's Chief Diversity Officer, Dr. Chon Glover, to kick off this session and moderate our esteemed panel. Dr. Glover has been a part of William & Mary's community since joining our staff in February of 1996 from her undergraduate alma mater, Presbyterian College, where she served as the coordinator of volunteer services and director of minority affairs. Over her 25-year career with William & Mary, Dr. Glover has had several positions, including Director of Multicultural Affairs, Interim Assistant Vice President of Student Affairs, Assistant to the President for Diversity and Community Initiatives, and since 2012 as William & Mary's Chief Diversity Officer. In addition to her leadership as a staff member of William & Mary Community, Dr. Glover is a proud alumna of William & Mary's School of Education, where she earned her master's and doctorate in education. We are truly delighted to have Chon share her expertise with all of us today and moderate our discussion. Chon, please take it away.
Thank you, Michael. I am very excited to share this space with our guests tonight. So welcome and thank you all for being here. We are so excited to have William & Mary's very own alums, Cord Jefferson and Phil Sun, both of the class of 2004. To our audience, thank you again for joining us this evening as we dig into the topic of diverse voices in Hollywood. Over the last year, we have experienced a global pandemic, an economic pandemic, and a rise in racial and social injustices. Even more recently, the news that 6 Asian women were among those killed in Atlanta shootings has drawn attention to the jarring rise of anti-Black and anti-Asian violence in the United States. It's time that we all stand together to try to fight this. The urgency of now in speaking to these racial and social injustices ask each of us to really think about how are we willing to add to the discussion. I am so excited to welcome Cord and Phil. I have some questions for you all, and I will begin my questions with this. And whoever would like to go first. Over the past year, as I said, we've seen the issue of racial inequity rise in the forefront of our national conversation. What has that been like for both of you? Cord, you're going to begin?
Sure. I mean, to me, it's been great to see. I think that these are things that I think that these issues have been part of the fabric of this nation since its foundation. And so I think that for me, the fact that we are finally making strides toward talking about these things openly and honestly is, it's. I feel like it's exciting and it's long past due in my opinion.
Yeah, I would have to agree. I think the one good thing out of COVID is that it stopped everyone this year to really, unfortunately, with the tragedies, of course, but it stopped you on the news cycle and your inability to escape what was going on in our country. And there was no channel to turn to because there was no content being made. with everybody at home. So I agree with Cord. It's exciting. It's an exciting time to be discussing. I think for both of us, not to speak for Cord, but certainly in the industry, it's an exciting time to be doing something about it. And I think, both of us are trying our best to do that.
Absolutely. Thank you. So, speaking of how we can actually make a difference, what can you share about your own journey as a non-white person in the entertainment industry?
Or go for it.
You go, man. I think Phil's been in it longer than I have. I've been working in entertainment for about 7 years now. I was a journalist before that. But the thing that I will say is that the nice thing, at least in my experience, and I understand that my experience is unique and individual to me. But the thing that I've noticed is that literally every writer's room that I've been in has been populated by people who are very, very thoughtful about these issues. I've not worked in a single writer's room in which people aren't thinking about these things. Now, to be sure, most of the writers' rooms I've been in have been run by white men, and so that is obviously, this industry is still very much disproportionately finds white men in disproportionate positions of power. But I will say that everybody that I've worked with, to a person, has been open and honest that they want to sort of change the dynamic and be honest about these conversations. So, Watchmen, a show that I worked on, created by Damon Lindelof, who's a white man. He said that he wanted to make sure that room was populated by mostly Black writers, and so he made sure to go out and hire. I would say at least like 70% of the writers in that room were Black people. Same with the first show I ever worked on, Survivor's Remorse. Mike O'Malley was a white man who created that show, but that room was, I would say, 90% Black. Like, I think that, and The Good Place I worked on with Mike Schur, there was tremendous gender diversity in that room, as well as racial and ethnic diversity. Like things are not perfect yet, but I will say that the conversation is at a place that many, many people in this industry are taking it very seriously and doing what they can to the best of their ability to try to change things and sort of like make new traditions in this industry, in my experience.
Yeah, I think that's certainly the new world order, where it's trying to be. I think I started in the industry in 2005, so I came out pretty much right after school, and to see the shift from how it was to how kind of when Cord came in, right? I think was that before Oscar So White or after Oscar So White?
It was like 2014, so I think maybe right around just a little bit, yeah, right? Yeah.
Like it's almost like when the industry started to, when society started to ridicule the industry, and there were powerful enough and talented enough, the combination of creators of color, actors of color, talent of color, that were who had basically had enough, right? And so I think that Cord's worked with some great showrunners, again predominantly white, who are using their platform to change the game, which is what we need. Allies to understand their power and their significance if there are to be changes made in this industry. Yeah. But my journey is, to your question, it's been pretty lonely, because everyone's taught that there's one seat at the table. So for the minorities that I do know, it was oftentimes like, I got to get mine, and I'm with you, man, but like, I got to get mine for my family, for my life, etc. I think that is changing, thank goodness, right now in the last few years, and even more so into the future. And there's more of us, right? There's more, I think, generationally, specifically for the Asian community. It's like, going to Hollywood, being a representative or being a creative was not really an option for a lot of us, with immigrant parents who just wanted you to be safe and be a doctor, be a lawyer, be a government worker, be something consistent and safe. But I think it's catching up. Like they're now generations of like, oh, I can take this risk. oh, there is actual economic satisfaction here and also artistic satisfaction in one area. So I hope it continues to grow.
Yeah, and I think that I mean, just to piggyback on that a little bit, I think that I believe that it's morally right to diversify Hollywood. Like I think that is the morally right thing to do. But even, some people, morality isn't necessarily the name of the game in this industry. And so for people who aren't looking at it from a place of morality and ethics, I think that something that is also changing is, in the most deeply cynical sense, people are realizing that there's money to be made off of diversifying Hollywood. And so I think that, we can look at something like Crazy Rich Asians, where it was like, oh my God, if we actually make movies by and about and, starring Asian people, like we can make a boatload of money. And I think and I think they're saying like, oh my God, if we make movies like Get Out, that is like created by and about Black people, like we can make a lot of money. And I think that, if even for the people who aren't moved by the morality of it, I think that the people are being moved by sort of like the wise business decision of like, if you actually sort of like give people content that represents them and reflects their lives back to them, they're hungry for that and they're going to give you their money, which is, I wish that the morality would move people, but if the morality doesn't move them, then the money will.
Yeah, morality doesn't really exist in our town that often. But it's Cord makes a very great point. It's a business, right? It's economic windfall to believe in diversity, but it's crazy to me, even over the years, and Cord knows this, it's just like, Black Panther, Crazy Rich Asians, Get Out, all the examples that he named, box office successes, if not some of the greatest box office successes of the year, if not of all time. But yet you only see those films every once in a blue moon, maybe like one or two a year in that way. And then if you don't have consistency, right, if you have decision makers making consistent decisions to put content for diverse audiences on the screen, then every time it comes out, it's like, oh, it's an anomaly. Like, right, how did we not know this happens? It's like, but every time you put out a piece of content that's created by people of color, it works. Yeah. So imagine if you just made a bunch of them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So Cord, especially for you, you won an Emmy. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank
you.
Yes,
I agree. For your work on Watchmen that had such strong elements of diversity and representation. Tell us more about that experience and what it was like to tackle those themes.
It was great. It was great. I had been a huge fan of Damon's. Fan of Lost, and I was a huge fan of The Leftovers, which was on HBO. The Leftovers was one of my favorite shows ever, and so when I met with Damon, I was going to work with him basically no matter what he asked me to work on. But he told me that he was going to try to adapt Watchmen, and that he wanted to make. He said the first time we talked about it, like, I want to make this about race in America, and I specifically wanted to be set in Tulsa. He had read The Case for Reparations by Ta-Nehisi Coates, in which Ta-Nehisi had discussed the Tulsa massacre in that article, and that event had really stuck with Damon. And so he said, I want to make this about race in America, and I want the Tulsa massacre to be at the forefront of the story. And so, excuse me, when I was a journalist still, I spent a lot of my time writing about race in America and sort of the intersection of race and culture. So, when he said, I want to make this a genre superhero sci-fi show, but that's largely rooted in American history and sort of authentic American experiences, particularly pertaining to Black Americans, I sort of, I was on board instantly. And then, the show was incredibly difficult to write because it was, so complex, and there was so many third rail issues. You're dealing with reparations and, incredible racial violence and sexual violence. It was just a very, very, a lot of heavy discussions every day. But at the same time, the room that Damon gathered was just room full of very thoughtful. I mean, that's one of the great things about working in this industry is you're just surrounded by people who are very smart and funny and thoughtful and interested in storytelling in the ways that you are. And so, it took 2 years. We started writing that show in September of 2017 and didn't premiere until October of 2019. So it was over 2 years of work, but I'm incredibly proud of what we made and very happy that it worked the way that it did. You're on mute.
Oh. Yes, and very preemptive almost to what we started to anticipate and actually experience in 2020.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the thing that people say that the show felt prescient, but the thing that I always say to people when they say that is that we didn't have crystal balls in the writers' room. We had history books, and I think that if you read the history of this country, you're going to see that history repeats itself time and again, particularly when it comes to, unfortunately, racism and police violence and oppression. Like these are things that have been pretty continuous in sort of the American experience, and so. I'm happy that people, the masks we could not have predicted. I will say we had no idea that the masks were going to be a sort of a mainstay in American society like a year after we made the show. But for the rest of it, we were just going on stuff that we read in history books, and unfortunately that it remains relevant even 100 years after the massacre. Massacre is going to be 100 years old this year, and sort of it's very sad that 100 years later we're still dealing with these things.
Thank you. To Phil, for you, you achieved success and developed a reputation for representing talent from diverse backgrounds, and recently took that to the next level by forming your own agency with that express mission. Congratulations to you also.
Thank you.
Hand claps, yes. Tell us more about that.
Yeah. So as I said earlier, when I went to LA, I started in the mailroom of William Morris Agency. So it was like the Harvard of agencies or I suppose the William and Mary of agencies. And it became WME when we merged with Endeavor. And I spent my 15 years training as representative there. And had good mentors along the way. One specifically, Charles King, who was the first Black partner at William Morris Agency, and started a company named Macro, a multicultural production company studio, pushing out stories from underrepresented voices. This year they did Judas and the Black Messiah. So he's always been a mentor of mine. And when he left the agency to start Macro, it was kind of me at the agency. So I stayed because I felt that my time there wasn't done yet. I wanted to follow him and go with my mentor, but it was kind of a gut feeling that there was more to do. And so I really dedicated myself to representing diverse voices, to give them a voice in the staff meetings that are full of old white Jewish men trying to tell the same stories or trying to tell our stories, right? And it's just not as authentic, and there's nothing that I can compare it to. But when you have a minority representing minorities, how you represent them is a whole different ballgame. But I did feel and I love WME. It's just as I was getting older, I felt like everything I was doing there was a program, right? Whether it was the diversity program or the pipeline program, et cetera, et cetera. And I just didn't feel like I was, and nor my clients, my very talented clients I was blessed to represent, they weren't a program, they were the norm. They were where everyone was, where culture was headed, right? And where the industry was headed, as Cord has said, on the Zoom.
Yeah.
So, with the birth of my son and COVID for the first time, as we said, everyone got to pause. Yes. I really kind of reflected in like, what more can I do here? Versus finally peeling off and joining Charles and starting the representation arm of Macro, which is called M88, M for macro, 88 for the luckiest number in Chinese culture. So it's kind of the cultures combining. So we made the jump, and as rep life goes, for those who know representative life, it was a blessing that all the clients came and believed in the mission. You know, and we're a representation firm, period. We are built majority underrepresented voices and managers, right? So of the 12 people now, 11 or 12 of 12 are women or people of color. 11 are people of color. And we're going to keep hiring and expanding, and you know, allies are certainly welcome. Anyone who, you know, as Cord and I have both met people who are allies, who use their platform to advance the cause. It's not going to be restrictive, right? It's actually more inclusive than any place. And I think it's time also that, you know, a Black owned, minority run representation firm gets its chance to swing with the big boys, if you will. Because, you know, there's a lot of fun misfits out there that are coming together to represent, you know, what we think is the future of the industry. So it'll be a good ride, hopefully, but it's fun. It's fun so far.
Yeah, that's exciting. We're going to open up some wonderful opportunities. So this is for both of you. What advice would you give to the next generation who are getting started in this industry? Wise words of that you would share.
Stay in school for as long as you can. Go to the cheese shop and just stay there.
Yeah.
I'll start, Cord.
Yeah.
Advice for the next generation. Stay curious, stay open-minded, but be definitive in what you want to get done, right? This town specifically has a knack for trying to mold you into what they want you to be, and take away kind of the inspiration that you bring to the industry when you're a young person coming in. Assimilate, if you will. If you can keep that fight, and just remember that even if you find success in the industry here, the reason you're finding success is because they liked who you were, not who you're becoming. Right? They'll use who you're becoming, but they liked who you were. Right? So the longer you can kind of remember that, especially in this industry, that as you grow, throws things at you that we would never understand in Williamsburg, Virginia, right? Like, it's just things that, you know, that you see in the magazines. But if you can hold true to who you were when you started, that's really the biggest piece of advice I could give anyone.
That's very powerful.
I think that sort of commitment to yourself and your taste and who you are and what you want to make is incredibly important. And I would say just trusting, you know, trusting even that you have a story to tell, and that your opinion and your story is just as valid as anybody else's opinion. And I think that, you know, I think that a lot of people, when I didn't work in entertainment, it felt insurmountable. It felt impenetrable. It feels like, how do I even get into this club? Because it seems like it's a very small group of people all chasing the exact same jobs. And like, if you don't know somebody in the industry, if your dad's not a director, your mom's not a producer, like, what do you do? And so I think that, so a lot of people, I think, stop before they even begin trying. And I think that a confidence in that you have a story to tell, and that your story, if you're a woman or a person of color or a queer person, is just as valid as Steven Spielberg's story or Michael Bay's story or any of these other like huge people who have been in this industry forever, or Scorsese. Like, all of those people are incredibly gifted and talented, but, you know, so are millions of other people who haven't been given an opportunity to work in this industry. So I think that trusting that you have a story to tell that people will be interested in, and trusting in your taste, I think is, you know, I think that something that's irritating, something that Phil said that is absolutely true, is that this town tries to mold you into being something. And it also, something that this town also does is doesn't believe in anything until somebody else tries it, and then everybody else tries to replicate it. And so like, I was just talking to somebody, I won't name where they work, but they were just telling me that their new mandate is like, we have to find our Bridgerton. And it's like, because Bridgerton was huge for Netflix, and so now everybody else in town is like desperate for their Bridgerton. And it's like, and it's so incredibly annoying that is the case for everybody. But B, it's sort of evidence that like people do take risks from time to time. People do take chances on things like Bridgerton or like Crazy Rich Asians. And when those things hit, which inevitably some things are going to hit from time to time, then everybody else is stuck trying to chase that originality. And so coming in and sort of like trusting in your vision and trusting in your taste and trusting that you have something to say, I think is just an incredibly important thing, because if you do not do those things, then this town will wear you down, because you get rejected all the time. Everybody says no to you all the time. And at a certain point, it starts to feel like a war of attrition, where it's like, because people just give up, and because people get beaten down by it, and they go move on to do other things, and they go and they say like, or they do it the different thing, which is like, okay, I've been beaten down, and so now I'm just going to make the things that you want me to make, because I understand that that's the path of least resistance. But if you sort of come in and just sort of continue believing in yourself and continue believing that you have something to say, I think that is incredibly important to not let the rejection sway your opinion of yourself and your ideas.
They say, by the way, they say yes to Cord all the time now because he just
right.
Oh my God!
Right.
I wish that were the case. If only.
Here's your Bridgerton, right?
He's our Bridgerton. Okay.
I will note on the Bridgerton and the Crazy Rich Asian examples, right?
Mhm.
Just on the diversity conversation, just know that the inner workings of the industry. Crazy Rich Asians was directed by John Chu, and greenlit by Kevin Sujihara, like minorities that were making decisions, right?
Yeah.
Bridgerton exists because of Shonda Rhimes, right? So like the more underrepresented, diverse voices, global majority voices that are coming through the industry, right? The more is getting done, right? And it's gonna take a while, but we're in a time where we're finally finding each other and supporting each other in that way.
And we got to keep building the pipeline.
That's
and
right.
Encouraging more people.
That's right.
I have some more questions, but we have some really great questions from our audience, and I'm going to go to those now. So the first question is, could you touch on the lack of access to networks many people of color, especially children of immigrants, deal with, and how to navigate a field that relies so heavily on nepotism and pre-established connections? Who wants to go first?
I can go first from just speaking on my experience, right? It's difficult. All right. It's and like Cord said, when you look at it from the outside, it's insurmountable, right? Like how do you break in? How do you get to that? How do you get to Hollywood, right? I think though the purpose of kind of, as history repeats itself and as things go, the purpose of guys like Cord, myself, individuals who come over and break through,
Right.
is to pay it forward, right? So the answer for someone like me in 2005 is much different than now, right? It's networks are available to you. You have to be savvy, right? The networks that you're probably thinking about that are the circles and the clubs that that everyone is in because of your family, your dad's relationship, your mom's relationship, etc.
Right.
Outsiders have infiltrated Hollywood, and there are a surprising amount of a number of people that are actually outsiders and they forget that they were out from the outside, right? Because they've assimilated. But just like for myself, for instance, I'm a network for William and Mary people. So is Cord, right? So is Craig. You just have to be hungry and go find it. All right. Yes, you have to put in a little extra work. It's not like calling your dad when your dad calling somebody, right? But you have to do your homework and then rely on us to put you in the rooms that will give you the opportunity to swing. Now, I'm a little bit harsh on it in that it's about getting you to the start line, right? You have to run, right? Like all we can do is open the door to William Morris or CAA or Damon Lindelof's, whatever, we can connect you with the entry point. You have to have done the homework and then you have to run. But you fight it now by being a bit more savvy and using, there's connections everywhere. Like it's even, I feel bad about myself right now because like I know Cord's here in the industry, right?
Right.
I haven't found him in years, but now I've found him and we'll use that.
Right. So the next question.
I'll keep building until Cord comes back.
Right. So the next question is, what is your take on the controversy over James Corden playing a gay man in The Prom? Should gay actors be prioritized for gay characters? And if so, does that mean straight actors should be prioritized for straight roles?
That's a tough one, right? Because on face value, no, Corden should not have played that role, right? A gay actor likely should have played that role. However, Ryan Murphy directed that, who's a very openly gay man, and he made that choice, right? So that's kind of like, there's no clear answer to that one. It really is, in my opinion, you fall on where your opinion is, because if it had been it's a different conversation if Martin Scorsese, hired Leo to play a gay role, right? That's an obvious, in my opinion, like miscast. Right. But because of the Ryan Murphy variable, I think it becomes a very interesting conversation that I don't know that has a right answer.
Okay. All right. Cord, this one is specifically for you.
Okay.
You've been a part of so many legendary rooms. Do you have hopes of developing your own project sometime?
Yeah. I just signed a deal. I have what's called an overall deal with Warner Brothers here, and so my goal goes for 4 years now, and so my goal for the next 4 years is going to be try to developing my own material and getting my own stuff on the air. So yes, it is. I wish it were as easy as Philip says, as showing the Emmy and sort of walking in the room and saying, "Put my show on the air." It is not as simple as that, as despite all my wishes. But yes, I am slowly working toward getting my stuff on the air. So hopefully there will be news about that very soon.
That is very exciting. Very, very exciting.
Yeah.
So I think this is for both of you. You talked about this town, in quotes. Do you think California is still the center for entertainment, or do you see other parts of the country, especially post-COVID, building a strong entertainment center?
Atlanta.
Yeah.
Atlanta may be the new hub, to be honest. Tax breaks, studios, access.
Yeah, I mean, how big is Tyler Perry? Tyler Perry has like a massive studio down there.
He bought that old military base. Yeah. So
yeah.
There's about 3 or 4 studios that are going to pop up in Atlanta itself. And what's encouraging, I mean, Marvel's down there, like they're huge productions have moved towards Atlanta. I would say LA's, I mean, the tax breaks aren't great here, right? So I think Atlanta and New Orleans to a certain degree, right? And then there are new studios popping up everywhere. Like they're trying to make one in Jersey. Yonkers just opened one. So, but I think the epicenter of information is still LA for when you're starting out. Right. But certainly for production, I think you can say that Atlanta probably is taking over.
Yeah, I agree with that. Although, I mean, I will say, if your goal is to break into entertainment, I would still say that there's probably no better place to be than Los Angeles to do that. And once you've sort of like established a foothold, then there are a lot more avenues to places you can go. But if your goal is to sort of like get your first job, I think it's going to be easier to do that in Los Angeles than anywhere else.
The one caveat I would say is if you're trying to break into the theater business, go to New York.
New York, yeah.
That's still the epicenter of real acting, right, as we say, on Broadway.
Okay. Given the long lead time needed to create and launch shows and movies, for instance, Cord, you mentioned 2 years for Watchmen. How can the entertainment industry maintain the current momentum for welcoming new BIPOC talent, supporting them, and developing their projects?
Could you ask that again? I'm not sure I fully.
Absolutely. Given, hold on one second. Okay, given the long lead time needed to create and launch shows and movies, for instance, Cord mentioned 2 years for Watchmen. How can the entertainment industry maintain the current momentum for welcoming new BIPOC talent, supporting them, and developing their projects?
Well, I would say firstly that Watchmen, that is highly irregular. The vast majority of TV shows are not going to take 2 years to write. That is so the most writers' rooms nowadays, you're talking like maximum 20 weeks. I have a friend who's in a writer's room right now that's lasting 10 weeks. So the 2 years of working on the show is highly irregular, and I think, you know, a Damon Lindelof specific thing, because he's just such a big deal that he can say, I want to take 2 years to do this. But secondly, I think that now is one of the best times in history to be a BIPOC person and trying to get in this industry, because there's just such a need for content. Like there's just such, I hate to use the word content, because I think that sort of content just mushes it all together, and it's sort of a more commercial term than sort of what we're actually talking about, which is films and television shows, which is art and people's art. But I think that there is just, you know, last I heard there was like 650 scripted shows on television, and more happening all the time. And like that was, you know, and there's constant, you know, now there's like Roku is trying to get into original content. Like there's just all these new places that are trying to get into making original content. And so there's just a demand for just so many scripts and directors and producers and actors and writers. Like there's just a huge demand for anything that you can make. So if you are a person of color or looking to get into this industry, I would say now is the perfect time to strike, because there is just such a demand for new voices and new talent.
Okay. For those of you who may not know, I just want to explain what BIPOC is. An acronym for Black, Indigenous, People of Color. So just wanted to make sure I was able to share that. Okay, Phil, this is the question for you. Right. Phil, as you know, the film industry lacks diversity, especially for film composers. Does your company include minority composers as a part of the talent you represent? If not, is there a plan to represent them in the future?
The answer is it does not yet, because we're 11 strong. But there is definitely a plan to expand into composers and below the line and other avenues of production, et cetera, that a representation firm has. Will hopefully be at full strength within year 3. But maybe it's year 3.5 to buy me some time from COVID slowing down a few things. But yeah, that absolutely. I mean, composers are every bit as much as important as anything else to, you know, the production of a film or television show. So yes, there's a plan to get there. In the meantime, if you're looking for representation, though, the agencies, they do represent composers. They don't speak about them as much because it's not as flashy, but yes, all the major agencies have that division.
Okay, here's a question for either one of you. As an emerging TV writer, what advice can you offer me on how to seek representation in Hollywood, and when is the right time? You've kind of answered that, but if there's any more you want to add to that.
That's the $1 million question. That's very hard, unfortunately. I can say that, you know, there are some management companies and some agencies, smaller ones, that will accept unsolicited submissions. So you can just send your script into them. There's also, I have a friend who had some success with the Blacklist. He put his script on the Blacklist, and he got I think 3 or 4 agencies reached out to him, smaller agencies, but still agencies nonetheless, who reached out to him and said they wanted to meet with him and discuss representing him. So the Blacklist, I would say, is a good resource for trying to get your script read by people in the industry. But outside of that, I will admit that, that is the $1 million question. Phil might have a better view on how to get your script in front of reps.
I mean, I think that using those avenues are probably the best ways thus far. Franklin Leonard does a very good job with the Blacklist. And, there's Sundance Labs. Again, you just got to do a little research about like where organizations have, and they're more and more popping up, like Macro and Warner Brothers is doing now an incubator lab. So especially for emerging voices of color, there are more and more opportunities to get in at the ground level without representation to get some advice and help. And then ultimately, like Cord said, you'll probably get looks from smaller agencies first, but nonetheless, they're agencies. And then it's a whole strategy of once you get in, then the strategy begins. How do you get up?
And there's also something to not discount. I don't think it's like the solve for everybody, but I don't know if you guys remember this, but I think it was even before I was working in TV, but I don't remember. But there was a comedian who wrote a script that was Seinfeld, but post 9/11 Seinfeld. Like if Seinfeld had been around after 9/11, and it was it was huge. Like it sort of like made the rounds around Hollywood. It was a guy who wasn't represented, who didn't have a job on a TV show, and he sort of wrote this spec script, the Seinfeld spec script that became incredibly popular, that everybody talked about. And he just put it out on Twitter. He just tweeted the link one day and said, "I wrote this," and it became sort of an overnight success. And he got staffed. I think he ended up getting staffed on Family Guy or American Dad or something based on him just tweeting out the link to his script. So, again, that's a shot in the dark, but it's also, social media is a way to, I worked with a woman on The Good Place named Megan Amram, who first found success via her social media presence, via her Tumblr and her just her presence online. So, again, these aren't. I worked with another guy on The Nightly Show, which was a late night show that I worked on, who got picked up because he was of his Twitter account also. Like social media is a way to sort of get yourself in front of the eyes of people who work in entertainment and to establish relationships. It's not, again, it's like, there's literally millions of people on the internet trying to do that at any one time, but it is a resource, at least that is available to everybody as long as you have an internet connection and a computer.
Wonderful. So we're getting close to our ending time, but I have this question. I'm going to combine two of them because it's connected. And this is for both of you. Does your William and Mary degree impress people in LA, or do they look at you and wonder why you ever went there? And then combined with that, how did your William and Mary experience contribute to your success?
I mean, I think people in LA, very few know William and Mary, the College of William and Mary, when we say it. But it sounds to them like they think it's Ivy. For the ones I've met, they're like, "Oh yeah," because everyone says like, "Oh yeah, I know that school. Yeah, it's very," and then you just lead them like it's very prestigious,
right?
And they're like, "Yeah, I know," it's like Harvard, whatever. It's like you lead LA to believe what they believe, but it's there's never been a negative response. No one laughs, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I don't know if Cord's faced otherwise, but it's I always think my time at William and Mary, we were talking about this.
Yeah.
Obviously, is like my time at William and Mary created who I was. And the ability to, I was an IR major, so I got to dip in my toe into every subject matter there was. And it made me, it made my choices flexible, right? And I learned how to bounce from subject to subject to subject and get what I needed from them. And again, it kind of reaffirmed my core values. I was just telling the doc earlier, it's just like, I miss the sunken gardens, right? Like hanging out in the sunken gardens kind of gives you, like looking at Ren, it kind of gives you a center, a sense of history, sense of calm, which is super important as you go through days here where you're working like 20 hours a day in La La Land. So yeah, it helps out quite a bit.
Thank you. Cord?
Yeah, I mean, I sort of had the same experience. There's besides Phil, it's like Glenn Close and Bill Lawrence, who created Scrubs, and now Ted Lasso. Like he's a William & Mary person. So there's a few of us out here. There's far more of the Harvard Lampoon people than there are William & Mary people. But we are we're small but mighty. I think that for me, I was, if I'm being perfectly frank, I was a horrible student. I was really, really a bad student. I did not apply myself. I wish that I would have applied myself more. But the major that I was in, my concentration ended up being sociology, and I became a sociology major because I felt like I was adrift in college, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I didn't go into college sort of with any idea about what my future was going to be. My dad's a lawyer and my mom was an educator, and I always assumed that I'd probably be a professional of some kind, but I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. And so I was kind of bouncing around in my GREs and confused. And I ended up focusing on sociology because I felt like sociology helped me learn how to think, how I wanted to think about the world. I'm from Tucson, Arizona, which is a pretty homogenous place, and it's particularly my corner of Tucson, Arizona was largely affluent white people, many of whom were Republicans, and sort of there wasn't a lot of diversity of thought and ethnic diversity and religious diversity. Like it was a pretty cookie cutter suburb. And so when I went to college and I started taking these classes, I felt like all of a sudden I was taking classes about immigration, and I was taking classes about women's studies, and I was taking classes about criminal justice, and I was taking classes about Black history, and I was sort of confronted with all these ideas and ways of thinking that I hadn't really been confronted with before. And so I think that I truly look at that time in my life, despite the fact that I was a pretty horrible student, I look at that time as really sort of guiding the way that I started to want to think about the world, and the way that I wanted to go about living my life once I left school. So, I feel I had a lot of great experiences at William & Mary. I wish that I would have done more of the reading that was requested of me. To be honest,
Cord's flip-flop game was very strong.
Hidden secrets that are coming out.
Flip-flop, I remember as rival fraternities go. I always remember when Cord's coming.
I was from Arizona, and so I had never really had winter, and so I thought flip-flops were a year-round thing. So I coming from my high school, it was just kind of, you wore flip-flops 12 months a year. And then I got to William & Mary, and I remember trying to wear flip-flops the first day it snowed. And I was like, wow. Oh, you can't, this is no longer reasonable.
Oh, wow.
You can wear flip-flops with that Emmy of yours when you come back from the reunion.
Show it one more time, Phil. You can. Yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah. So we are getting close to the end. We are at the end, but I do have one last question for both of you. We've talked about, where we are right now as a society, and we've talked about the things that we've experienced and the ways in which we want to be change agents in including the pipeline and making sure that we have more people who can be a part of this conversation and other conversations. Final question: what gives you hope?
People like Phil. I think that to me is the name of the game. I think that it's what Phil said earlier, is like it's now our responsibility to try to throw down the ladder and invite other people in. And I think that Phil taking this leap, which is, I'm sure, was a scary leap from this sort of like established, very well respected, very powerful, very wealthy company, that he probably easily could have stayed at for his entire career and done very well and made a lot of money, to leave that behind and try something new, and to say that at the outset that your mandate is to try and diversify this industry. I think that takes a lot of bravery, and I think that it's more of what we need in this industry. That's how it happens. Is you get in, and then you sort of like put your hand back and pull other people in, so and teach them how to do the job. I think that I was a journalist. I had never written a script before I got my first TV job. I was hired by Mike O'Malley, and a bunch of people who had done this job for a long time taught me how to be good at it, and they sort of like ushered me along and shepherded me and trained me so that I could get to a position of some power and hopefully train the next generation of writers. So I think that I look at people like Phil who are trying new things and trying new things with a mandate of helping out people who've been underrepresented in this industry for centuries now. And I'm like, this is exactly what we need. So I think that there's a lot of people who give me hope, but I think that one of them is sitting in this room right now.
I appreciate that, man. I mean, I returned the comment to Cord, like the Cord being, with all jokes aside, like being rewarded for his excellent talent and people giving him the opportunities he deserves from the studios and networks and whomever has the financiers. That gives me hope, right? Because he is the most talented, right? So he should get the shots, and it should be not a difficult conversation. So I think what also gives me hope is like guys like us finding each other in LA and our communities kind of linking arms across the board, whether it's Black, Asian, Latinx, LGBTQIA plus. Like you're seeing that in town now, where like we're really here for each other, and we're not going to let one group take a beating, if you will, right, without hearing from the rest of us. And that unity is super impactful. And I think ultimately seeing the young voices that are coming up and being unapologetically themselves and telling the stories of their cultures and their background, and watching people respond to that in a positive way, that's hopeful. But look, I think we're on the cusp of being great, if we let ourselves be here in this town. But we're gonna need, as we always say on these kind of Zooms, especially with William and Mary's, like we're gonna need more voices out here. So don't be afraid by the mountain that it seems. Like you have ways in. Look us up. I don't want to volunteer Cord's cell phone. I'll put it on the chat. But specifically for representation, what my company does, like reach out. There's always at least advice or direction to be given, and it's yours.
I just want to close by saying you all have been absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much. What gives me hope is seeing the solidarity that you have and the commitment to paying it forward. And I really, really appreciate your time, and we appreciate your time at William and Mary. We're very proud of you. Keep up all the wonderful things that you're doing, and we're supporting you. And no matter what anybody says, we'll tell them we're William and Mary, and we'll let them know who we really are. Exactly. So right. With that, thank you all very much. And Michael, I'll turn it back over to you.
We can't hear you, Michael.
Can't hear you.
All right, can you hear me now? Yes. Okay. Thank you, Chon, Cord, and Phil for a terrific hour. This really was an incredible discussion, one that I felt like I was in the living room hearing you talk about some important topics that are really key. And we're just thrilled to have you leading our arts and entertainment community out west. And I'm sure we'll see you in Williamsburg soon, hopefully, for another conversation with Chon when we all can gather in person. But in the interim, like you said, go out there and network together. This arts and entertainment community that I mentioned earlier in my opening remarks is one that Craig Anzelon, my colleague out west, has really been driving, and we are so fortunate to have Craig in LA. So if you are in the field, please do reach out to Craig, contact him, and get more involved. As I mentioned, we have an upcoming event in May to celebrate the Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. We'll give more details to that in the near future, but if you stay tuned to the wmalumni.com website, you'll learn more about that event, as well as other great events happening this month and coming up in April. So with that, I want to say thank you again. I put a survey in the chat for those of you joining us. Please take a minute before you get on to your next activity. But again, congrats, Cord and Phil, on your great success. Keep up the great work. We're looking forward to seeing you continue to lead our arts and entertainment community forward and making a big impact on diversity in the entertainment field. It's great to have leaders like you. So, and Chon, we're just so lucky to have you as a colleague here at William & Mary, and your commitment to our institution is just really, really special, and one that it's so neat to have an alumna with such a committed interest in this topic to lead our direction. So I applaud you. And with that, everyone have a great evening. Stay safe, be well, and hope to see you soon. Peace.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Glover. Thank you, Michael.
Thank
Bye,
you.
guys.
Thank you. Have a good night.